Your cellular level needs to have nutrition. And more than anything, most women do not eat enough protein in their diet. They get up, they have their cup of coffee, then they sit down and they have a little bit of yogurt, and they dash out the door. And that's not enough. You've got to have enough protein. So let's say you're 140 pounds. I'm 140 pounds, by the way. You're 140 pounds. I need about 140 grams of actual protein a day. And if I start by trying to get that at 2 o'clock, am I going to make it? Probably not. But if I wake up and I start with 30 or 40, then I have it for lunch and then I have it for dinner, I'm going to eat that.
Hi, I'm Glennis Woods Mullins, and I love to help women to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. So come on, let's vibe. I get a lot of questions these days about all the different things that are available to us, both holistically and also pharmaceutically when it comes to our symptoms. And some of those things are really good for you and can really help and take you out of a crisis situation. And some of them maybe not so much. And that's why I'm so glad to have with us our guest, Jackie Roberts. Today's guest brings over 30 years worth of experience of working in elite laboratories and pharmaceutical experience to the midlife health conversation. And that includes years she's been educating healthcare providers on hormone replacement therapy, or as I sometimes refer to it as HRT. And instead of the clinical cold influencer type, she likes to be able to give advice that translates deep medical authority into a safe, grounded space. In other words, when she's talking, you'll be able to understand what she's saying. She helps face-centered women in particular to understand their hormones, rebuild their strength, and reconnect with themselves during menopause by combining a lot of rigorous lab analysis, strength-based wellness, and the nervous system awareness. It's so great to have you here. Jackie, welcome to the V.I.B.E podcast. It's wonderful having you here today.
Thank you for having me, Linus. I can tell you that I'm so excited to talk with your audience because I have had years of working in corporate America and in the laboratory, and I wish someone had been there to provide the guidance that I'm providing women today. And understanding what you do for women and what I do for women, we know that there's a huge population that's looking for some help and some guidance on what to do next and how to talk to their healthcare providers as well.
Yes, I'm glad we're having these conversations because it's a time where right now we need it more than ever because there's more awareness being raised now about menopause, what it isn't, and all the different things that are available. But we also need to understand from layman's terms, not just what's available, but how to talk to our doctors about some of these concerns. Because I think there's a disconnect sometimes. The doctors are thinking one way, we're struggling to try to figure out another way, and somewhere in the middle of that, things get lost in translation. So I definitely want to talk about that. But before we get started, I just want to talk about you a little bit. And before we just dive into the hormones and everything else, tell us a little bit about your background and what led you into the whole women's wellness sphere.
Absolutely. I started in the laboratory space years ago out of college because I knew that I wanted to do business and medicine and I couldn't figure out which side to go on. My mom said to me, do medicine and somebody will teach you the business of medicine. She was an RN, so gave me very good advice. And so starting out in laboratory medicine, I truly understood and knew that I was someone unique because there's not a lot of people like me in the laboratory, number one. And then when I came out into pharmaceutical sales, I then understood there were not a lot of people like me in that area as well, which meant as I continued to go along in my career where I became an executive, I understood that there was a lack of women who looked like me, who could share their experience to others who look like me to help them get through this transition. So think about it. My mom's gone now. She got me through puberty, but wasn't here to get me through menopause. So I then understood and knew that when I left pharmaceuticals just last year, that I had a capability to provide not only just the laboratory side of it, but the pharmaceutical side of it in the sense of what happens when it comes to managed care as well. Because a lot of times our women will go, and myself included, and say, can you give me this? Laboratory medicine is one thing, okay? And you have to understand laboratory medicine truly seeks to understand, do you have disease? So you can get a normal result, and it's just saying, okay, you don't have disease. They don't think of menopause as disease, okay? They think of it as a transition you're going through. And neither does the insurance company. They don't think, oh, it's disease. They say, okay, you're fine. You're just going through a transition. So this is where I felt it was important for myself to make sure I was advocating for women guiding women and helping them understand the types of conversations to have with their healthcare provider to get what they needed so they could feel better.
It's interesting. No, menopause is not a disease. The symptoms that it causes, if not addressed, can lead to disease. Like, for instance, low estrogen can lead to so many other complications. And when you go to the doctor, they don't necessarily lead with, let's take a look at your hormones. They usually lead with, what kind of pharmaceutical can I give you to get you out of pain, to get you out of uncomfortable. And then there's also that talk that sometimes physicians have that, oh, you're just getting older. It's a part of getting older.
I know. I hate that. Oh, it's just so aggravating. It's just, okay, I can't sleep at night because I got these hot flashes. So here's a sleeping pill. Or I feel really anxious. Here's an antidepressant or trazodone. Well, those are the things you don't want to provide. And so, but you have to remember, our healthcare providers, a lot of them that are out now came along when the WHI study really affected what they learned about menopause and treating menopause. And when I say WHI is the Health Initiative study, it's over 600,000 women. And that particular study put a black box warning on estrogen. So after that happened, you had a slew of healthcare providers who really wouldn't prescribe much to help patients besides to treat those symptoms. So when you think of functional medicine, though, you want to be able to function. And a woman cannot function if she's not feeling well, if she's feeling anxious, if she's not feeling like herself, is what I heard from someone a few months ago. She said, I just don't feel right. And I said, how old are you? She said, I'm 40 plus. I just turned 41. I said, okay. Are your periods regular? She said, no, they're off. I said, do you think you might be going through perimenopause? So these things aren't even coming up in our minds as women, and our healthcare providers aren't bringing them up. I brought them up to her, though. I said, this is something you might want to get checked. And this is how you're going to have that conversation. So at least she knew what to ask for when she went into her healthcare provider and why she needed it.
You know, you spent years teaching physicians and about replacement therapy. Was there anything happening in your own health journey that caused you to start questioning the conventional approach to this?
Oh gosh, absolutely. I think I probably saw 7 different specialists because I had all these different things that were happening to me. I had tingling in my legs. My thyroid started acting up. That was the first thing that happened. So I went to a cardiologist first because my heart rate increased. He said, I don't think anything's wrong with your heart, but something might be wrong with your thyroid. So what happens is, as our hormones start fluctuating, they can have an effect on our thyroid. So then I ended up in the endocrinologist's office, and then back to my OBGYN, and then to a neurologist at one point. And then also I had some inflammation. So I ended up with a pain specialist. I cannot name how many I saw probably in a matter of 4 or 5 years. And ended up having to get an ablation because I was bleeding so heavily as I was going through perimenopause, where I would bleed through all protection within 5 minutes as I was standing there talking to a healthcare provider or coaching someone else within our organization. So those were all my experiences that combined together was my perimenopause journey. So
Wow, that's incredible. At any of those times when you were visiting the various doctors, did anybody mention that some of this was due to your hormonal health?
absolutely not. Not one
That's
time.
just
Not one
blows
time.
my mind. 7
Yeah.
medical professionals. Now, let me just run a couple of disclaimers here for those of you who say, I have never said that I don't like doctors, traditionally trained doctors. Many of them I collaborate with. They're part of my practice, and I admire what they do, and they're necessary. My concern is that many women, 40s, 50s, and beyond, are feeling exhausted, anxious, disconnected from themselves, despite being told by these same very physicians that everything looks okay. And as you know,
Yes.
one of the reasons is that they have a different approach. Traditionally trained physicians are looking to basically take care of your symptoms, looking to treat disease. Menopause has a plethora of symptoms. It's not a disease, but it makes you feel uncomfortable. So there's got to be another way of dealing with this. So my issue isn't so much with traditionally trained physicians. My issue is the philosophy of practice. And I find that the functional holistic approach has a lot of answers to some of these issues.
Yes. It does. And once I got in front of a functional provider, she started figuring out my puzzle. She did the right testing on me. And regardless if the testing says what I am or not, because remember, testing is only testing the norms of a huge population. So what could be normal may not be optimal for you. So she could look at my testing and say, you're on the low side of normal, but that means nothing because your symptoms are saying something completely different. And because of that, she would make sure that she was treating my symptomatology in alignment, yes, with my testing, but the symptomatology was more important. So I'm so excited when I get to go back to her next time because she started on something else that's making my hair grow. So I'm excited about that piece. But she's looking for all those little clues. And it's great that I can look at it with her. She lets me see all my panels because she knows that I'm trained. And I look at it from 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago because I've been seeing her now for 10 years. And for those 10 years, I felt much better. And I see her more often. But the thing is with functional medicine providers is that you do pay a little bit of money in that for that. And I feel like future state, our functional medicine providers should be provided with the reimbursement like our other providers are through managed care. And
There,
so that's stopping our patients and our women from getting what they really need is because there's this dollar sign that's stopping them from seeing what they should see to help them get better.
yeah, that's a shame that the finances come into this. And this may seem sophomore, but it's really true. You either pay for it on the front end or the back end, but guaranteed
Yes.
you're going to pay for it somewhere along the way. And when I think
Mhm.
about front end and back end, the back end, you may not benefit from what you're paying because you're no longer on this level of living. Okay. The front end is where you want to be. But then again, there's the whole thing about priorities and what you
Yes.
think is important. So maybe if we paint a picture here, what are some of the most common symptoms women attribute to aging that may actually
Mm.
be hormone related?
I would say the inflammation is probably the number one that I would say. The aching in the knees, the aching when you move your arm, or the little twist that you feel on your side of your body. Those inflammation markers that are happening are usually related to your hormones changing. Ringing in the ears is another one. You say, "Oh, my ears are just going." No, they're not going. That could be related to actually what's going on with your hormones as well. Also, number one, I would say your body composition changes. I had a girlfriend ask me, she said, "You look about the same as you did in college." I said, "No, my body composition has changed a little bit. I've had a couple of children. And yes, it's easy for me to get weight around my waist." And so women say, "I'm just getting older, so my metabolism has slowed down. I'm just going to live with it. There's nothing I can do." There is something that you can do. But first, they have to understand their body's communicating with them differently. And they got to learn to communicate back to their body the same way so that they can get better. I spoke to a woman today and she said, one of my issues is that I decided to fast and because I just keep gaining weight as I get older. I said, "What's happening?" She's like, "Keep gaining weight." I said, "Because you're fasting because your body is asking you for food. So since you're not giving it food, what's happening is that it's taking any type of food you give it and it's putting it onto your waistline." And so she said, "Oh, I never thought about that."
It's holding on to that. And not to mention, because of cortisol levels, you have an increase of fat, but not the kind of fat that you would normally
Right.
have in terms of losing weight. That visceral fat is something totally different. And people
Yeah.
always look at me with one eyebrow cocked, and I say, you can actually lose weight by learning to really effectively meditate. I'm like, what? But yeah, because
Yes.
it was the cortisol levels, and the results are surprising. At this stage of the game, going hard in the gym and things like that may not be the best way to reduce the fat. Maybe you'll burn calories, but the result
Mhm.
not to be able to see it may be a little different. But let's talk a little bit
Yeah.
about your particular expertise, which I think is wonderful, and that is understanding our labs. What
Yeah.
hormone labs should women know about and discuss with their healthcare provider?
That's an excellent question because I'll tell you this. You can go into your provider and say, "Can you run my menopausal labs on me?" And they'll look at you and go, "Okay, so what's wrong with you?" So you've got to be able to say why you want the menopausal labs done. Okay. So when you go in and you say, "Oh, I want my menopausal labs done, and this is what I want to have done," it will then prompt the conversation to the healthcare provider to say, "Okay, she knows a little bit about what she's talking about." So I would say one panel is called the Reproductive and Menopause Status Panel, and that's going to include your FSH, which is your ovaries providing a follicular stimulating hormone. That is what's causing them to release the hormones that you use in your body, like estradiol and luteinizing hormone and progesterone. If those are going down, that quickly is an indication that you're probably in a perimenopausal state. And probably at the same time, you're skipping periods. You could go a half a year without a period, and all of a sudden that thing shows up again. And you go, what? Plus, you have all these symptoms that are happening. So, this is one way that confirms it. But again, remember, when you say that to the healthcare provider, he then says, or she then says, but you don't have a disease. All right. So they got to figure out how they're going to make sure they're going to get this paid for by your insurance company. So that's why they might do some look-alike or rule out panels to make sure that there's not something else going on with your adrenal glands. Things like doing a thyroid profile, a T4 level, or prolactin, iron and ferritin, also A1C and the glucose, because there are other things that are going on in menopause that can mimic these other midlife conditions. And if they add those on, they have a better chance of actually getting managed care to pay for it because they're trying to rule out disease. Okay. And
Right.
that particular profile is called just a rule out panel. And they're just ruling out some of the diseases that happen. In my case, I did have hypothyroidism and I still have hypothyroidism, but it still could have been brought on by what's going on with my hormones. Okay. But because I'm on a low dose of armored thyroid, I stay pretty even kill, but it has to be monitored by my functional medicine specialist, which he does a great job as well. Another one is testosterone panels. Okay, because if you think about it, okay, your libido's gone. Is libido a disease though? So that's where you'd have to say, I think my muscles are wasting away, and see if the doctor will go ahead and add it to that panel. Because remember, they're trying to make sure that they get this covered for you as well. And then I also would say that sometimes that you may run up against a healthcare provider who won't do any of it. And what you can do is you can actually order your own panels yourself. Quest Diagnostics and LabCorp do have them. You can pay for them yourself out of pocket, where you can get your estradiol, your LH, your follicular stimulating, your FSH done, and your progesterone done. I think with LabCorp or Quest, they actually add on prolactin and TSH for you as well. So these are opportunities in those panels for patients to figure out what's going on. Now, you probably noticed that I didn't mention cortisol. It's not really one of those ones that they would put into a disease panel, but cortisol, if it's increased, probably more than likely you got stress going through the roof. But there are different ways of measuring that. There's a way of doing it through saliva, and there's a way of doing it through a blood draw. Saliva testing is actually more accurate, but you really should do it during several times during the course of the day. So you want to collect those samples at least 4 times over the course of the day to get a really good result. And you want to be probably with the provider who understands what those results mean. So if you have a provider who says,
That was the
oh, yeah, I'm going to run some cortisol, then they know what they're doing at that point.
I know that's been an issue, is that some doctors really don't know how to read the panels. It wasn't part of their education or training at a time.
Correct.
It was black labeled anyway. So they just weren't using that information for evaluation. And now that's available. So when women take a
Yes.
look at their labs, what kinds of things should they be looking for?
What if menopause didn't have to feel like a battle, but a transition you actually feel good in? Introducing VitaFem, a plant-based alternative designed to support your body naturally without synthetic hormones. If you've been feeling off, dealing with night sweats, anxiety, brain fog, frozen shoulder, low energy, mood shifts, or restless nights, VitaFem works with your body to help restore balance so you can feel like yourself again. No harsh chemicals, no synthetic HRT, just powerful plant-based support that helps you feel vibrant, steady, and in control. Ready to experience menopause differently? Discover how VitaFem can support your next chapter naturally.
I would say, and that is an excellent question, because women, they look at their labs and they go, I don't know what to do about them. What does it mean?
What does this mean?
They
Right.
could look at them and they could all look normal. I kid you not. So what I would say is, even though if they look normal, don't look at the labs as the end all of be all. Okay. And also keep in mind that's a one point in time. if you take your labs drawn on the middle of your cycle versus the beginning of the cycle, they're going to look completely different because remember, as time goes on during the course of the month, when you ovulate, your hormone levels will change. So if you have it done at the beginning of the cycle versus the end of the cycle, you're going to have different changes. So what I would suggest for women is to make sure you understand and know when you should actually get those labs drawn in your cycle. But also not only that you know that, but the provider understands it and knows it. And if you have a provider who doesn't give you that type of insight or it sounds like they don't know, it's okay to find another provider. Okay. You can go online, you can Google and say, I'm looking for a menopause specialist in my area, and they'll come up because there are doctors who are now starting to say, look, I need to do something more for the women who are coming to see me than what I'm doing. Okay. And that's the type of physician that you want to have. But when you're looking at those results, what I would say, don't look at them and say, oh, I'm normal, I'm so upset. Look at them and say, they're not capturing what's going on with my symptoms. Okay. And make sure you talk to your healthcare provider about that. Say, look, I know these look normal, but my symptomatology is different than what we see here. We're going to have to retest these at an optimal time of my cycle during the course of the month to make sure we get a realistic view of what's going on with me during this perimenopausal season. Because remember, perimenopause can last anywhere from 5 to 12 years. So you want to make sure that you're not suffering all 12 years of that. So you can see I saw those specialists that was in a time period of perimenopause that I was having the heavy bleeding, then I'd have normal bleeding, then I'd have to go to the doctor for this and for that. In the midst of all that, I'm in the middle of this career that's taking off and raising two boys to be young men in today's society. That's a lot. And that's what most of our women are dealing with right
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing you mentioned earlier about hormone replacement therapy and what it was, and hormone replacement therapy is still somewhat controversial,
now. Yes.
only because of lack of education in most cases. What are the biggest misconceptions that women have about hormone replacement therapy?
The biggest misconceptions, which is probably what their moms are telling them, is that it causes breast cancer or it causes cardiac events. And that's because when the WHI study came out and half of the population went off of the estrogen they were on, the study did have end results that showed there was an increase in those two events. But it was because it was a synthetic progestin that was used in the study. Now, if you just use estrogen by itself, it did not see that actual increase in breast cancer or cardiovascular events. So the summary of the WHI study is why the actual black box warning got taken off. It's because we now understand and know that a bioidentical progesterone for a woman who has a uterus used with an estrogen is fine for these women. But I'm not saying that you have to use that because you could go on it and still feel bad, okay? But you do have to evaluate what your options are and be with a provider who can help you test what you do use and do understand that summary now, if you look at it in its entirety, will show you that was a synthetic progestin used that was causing the increased risk.
So now, theoretically, when you're looking at HRT, they are using the other progesterone and not the other ingredient before because they realize what the outcome could be if they hadn't stopped using that. But
Absolutely.
what would be a good candidate, or who would be a good candidate for hormone therapy?
Any woman who decides she wants to try it, okay? Because I think what I hear from most women, they'll say, oh, I've got a history of this, I've got a history of that, or I've got a history of venous disorders. Okay, so that's where you are then letting what that study said initially come back into your brain, okay? So you have to evaluate your risk factor with the healthcare provider that you're talking to. There's a reason why we have pharmacists and healthcare providers to look at the benefit risk ratio of any drug that's out on the market. Okay. So any drug that's out on the market has this wonderful package insert that tells all the studies about it. And for a long time, remember that black box warning was there. That black box warning is not there now, which means that if you want to try it, you can. Okay. And that if you have a uterus and you use a bioidentical progesterone with your estrogen, that you may actually be okay. So, but that's
And I can tell you from my experience, I was 67 maybe when I was starting to get the yeast infections. And of course, this was because
Mm.
of a lack of vaginal estrogen. But once I figured out what was going on with that, they told me that I was too old to take HRT that they suggest. And I said, no, no, that's not true. You have to advocate for yourself. And like Jackie said, if your doctor is being adamant about his point of view or her point of view, that's okay. Say thank you very much and find another doctor. Sometimes I think we can get so locked into our doctors, especially if you've been with a doctor for a long period of time. I get that. But sometimes, based upon the season that you're in, you may need to consider other reasons to find another doctor. And it's not that you're saying this doctor is not a good doctor. I believe that God places people in your life for a reason, for a season. And maybe that season is just up for that doctor. And it's time for you to go ahead and advocate for yourself to find another doctor that can not only help you find out what's going on, but be able to communicate and educate you in terms of what's going on with your body, because it's the only body that you have. As far as I know, it's the only one we got. And we need to be able to advocate for ourselves and understand what it is we're putting into our bodies, which is super important. Speaking of what you put into our bodies, what role does nutrition, movement, sleep, and spiritual wellness play in supporting our hormonal health?
Oh gosh, that's why the name of my company is Faithfully Strong Wellness.
Yes,
Okay.
let's talk about that. Why is that?
Yeah, because nutrition, number one, is paramount to our bodies being able to move, okay, and actually be moving efficiently through life. And I think I mentioned the young lady earlier of not eating till 11. And there are times, yes, that you want to fast. I fast and pray all the time when I'm talking to my Lord and Savior. But I can tell you, but continual fasting just increases your cortisol levels and makes you more stressed. Your cellular level needs to have nutrition. And more than anything, most women do not eat enough protein in their diet. They get up, they have their cup of coffee, and they sit down and they have a little bit of yogurt and they dash out the door. And that's not enough. You've got to have enough protein. So let's say you're 140 pounds. I'm 140 pounds, by the way. You're 140 pounds. I need about 140 grams of actual protein a day. And if I start by trying to get that at 2 o'clock, am I going to make it? Probably not. But if I wake up and I start with 30 or 40, then I have it for lunch and then I have it for dinner, I'm going to meet that. And then when you think of spirituality, a lot of women think that God just deserted them, that this world is just against them, and that they're by themselves in all of this, especially executive women, because they don't want to tell anyone that anything's going on with. They don't want to seem weak, especially when they've spent years and decades building their capabilities. So making sure that we are no longer silent around our sisters and supporting them with love and letting them know they're not failing, they're not losing, they're not broken, they are just fine is so vitally important. So once I retired and I wasn't on the plane anymore, I felt, okay, I've got to do something else. I was talking to a young lady at church. I said, are you in a small group? She says, no. I said, oh, let's start one. Now we're in this mega church. We have 10, 12 campuses. I thought there was a group at church that looked like me, but it wasn't. So here I was starting one. And I can tell you, this little group of women are so amazing when it comes to supporting me and me supporting them. So that's where the wellness comes in as well, is to make sure that you've got that grounded support around you. And then number three, I would say, is taking care of your body. Don't overdo the cardio, like you mentioned earlier. If you did 5 or 6 days of cardio when you were in your 20s and it worked, that's great. That's not going to work now. All it's going to do is make you gain weight. I can road bike when I'm training for a charity event, 100 miles a week. And when I'm doing that, I gain weight. Why? Because I'm stressing my body out. Okay. But when I stop biking those 100 miles a week, then the weight comes off because I'm doing more weightlifting exercise and not this constant cardio. So that's very important to know that your body is going through this transition and you've got to change the way you treat it as well as a result.
If there was one thing that every woman over 40 should know about hormones, what would that be? What would you want them to know?
Not to be afraid of them. That would be the one thing I would say. Don't be afraid of them. I would say this. They'll say, oh gosh, those hormones are going to cause problems. You have more hormones in your body when you were in your childbearing years than you have right now. So if they were going to cause problems, they would cause problems when you were younger. So keep in mind, the little bit they're putting into you to help you balance your symptoms is nothing compared to what you actually created within your body when you were in your childbearing years. So that would be the number one thing I would say. Don't be afraid of hormones. My mom was a nurse. She was on Premarin for years, okay? And when I started in the market with talking about HRT to doctors, she and I sat down. We looked at the studies. We went over the studies. But remember, when you look at the studies and you look at the symptomatology, there are two different things. And we took our brains and she made a decision to keep staying on it. So as a result, my sister didn't go on therapy, but I did. I feel a whole lot better. Okay. And I'm working on helping my sister feel a whole lot better too. But it is a very individual decision for women to make. But do make it and don't be afraid to make it, would be what I would say.
If you could leave every woman that's listening to this podcast with one message about this whole thing about aging and hormones and reclaiming her vitality, what would that be?
I would say, number one, it can be done. All right. And number two, believe and know that it's not a failure issue. It's not a self-discipline issue. It's an issue of understanding how to communicate with your body differently. I am 63 years old and I'm proud to say it. And I feel wonderful within my skin, but I can tell you that every day is a journey to get better. All right. It just doesn't happen overnight. I work hard at it because I understand and know I want to be here for my grandchildren one day down the road. Not anytime soon because they're not married, but I do want women to know that it can be done. They can get to a space where they feel amazing again. They just need to get in front of the right provider.
Wow, Jackie, thank you so much. So much information. I know all of you who are listening are going to be going back over everything that she said. I want to make sure that you take a look at the show page because there will be its website as well as her social media where you can follow her and get to know more. And talk a little bit about the services that you provide to women who need more information and help when it comes to understanding their hormones.
Yes, I'm releasing today a brief for women just to be able to understand and know a little bit more about the hormones that they should be looking for, and then also a physician conversation guide. So if you go to the Faithfully Strong Wellness Instagram, you will see a link there for them to go in and actually get a free guide to be able to understand what to say and how to say it as far as the conversations with the healthcare providers. And I also have what's called a menopause reset, a menopause stress reset. We reset you to help you understand where you are now and where you could be within 5 days. And then, of course, longer coaching. And I have some clients that I work with for 6 months to allow them to really have a menopause transformation because anything done over a 6-month period of time really changes a behavior so that they come out on the other side sustaining what they have learned from it.
Fantastic. Wow, Jackie, thank you so much. You've had so much information that we've shared. It has been wonderful having you on the V.I.B.E Living Podcast today.
Thank you, Lennis. Thank you for having me. I am so happy to be able to share. I'll come back at any time because I want to make sure that we continue to support our women out there. They need us. There's not enough of us talking about the conversation right now. And I think the more of us who are talking about it, sharing with each other, the better off we will all be for our families and for those that we support as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who are listening. I know there's a bunch of podcasts out there that you could be listening to. And the fact that you've chosen to spend some time with us means everything. And it also speaks to how you have helped get us to the top 5% of podcasts in the world. So let's keep growing. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share this podcast with another woman who you think could really benefit from the information. Don't forget to check all the information on the show page there because we also have our sponsors there. Please patronize our sponsors by at least going and taking a look at what they're talking about and then making a decision as to how it can help add to your overall wellness for your mind, body, and spirit. Thanks so much for listening. Have a fantastic day. And don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this podcast. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.